Stephen King, the master of horror. He has written so many classics over his career that he is dubbed one of the best. But throughout his vast catalog of books, occasionally you step on a landmine and you read a book that's just an absolute dud. The book in question today is Roadwork, commonly found in the Bachman Books collection. So to understand why, in my opinion, Roadwork is such a weak novel in Stephen King's catalog, let me give you a brief description of the plot. It follows a man called Barton who is undergoing a disintegrating marriage and is grieving over his lost son with the impending inevitable destruction of his home and work due to the extension of an interstate highway. The man becomes more unstable and fireworks happen at the end of the book. While this book, in theory, sounds excellent, it did not vibe with me whatsoever. And here's why. We have to give a little bit of grace with Roadwork because of its history. What makes this a more unique book? Roadwork was written under Stephen King's pseudonym, Richard Bachman. The reason why he did so was that his publishers were afraid that he was going to oversaturate the market under Stephen King's name. So as a result, he decided to use Richard Bachman's pseudonym as a way to play around with different themes and ideas that didn't match his previous books, being Salem's Lot and Carrie. This book allowed him to do a character study of a grieving man, which was inspired by his own grief with his mother who had succumbed to cancer. But with all that aside, based on the reviews when this book was published in 1981, they were mixed at best. So let me get into my own personal reasons why I disliked this book, because it was disjointed, uninspiring, and just confusing and boring at points. Undoubtedly, when you read Roadwork, you will feel sad and pity for Bart, the main character. But at the same time, I believe that the story is just not realistic. Now, I understand it's Stephen King and there's a lot of stuff and elements in his books that are unrealistic, but for a story that is in most parts realistic and there's no supernatural elements whatsoever, it just doesn't feel believable. So here you have this man who has lost his son. His wife is about to divorce him because he can't get over the fact the city is building a highway that is going to destroy his house and destroy his work. But despite this, he's being paid to relocate, and he is literally being paid by his job to relocate his own job as well. So why the hell is the main character deciding to just stand pat, frozen in time, and just not heeding the call of action and being a responsible human? Grief, despair. The man can't get over the fact that he has built his life in this suburban neighborhood and his son died due to a brain tumor. Now, I don't have any experience with the grief of a son. However, when I'm reading a novel, most of the times I prefer a character that has tenacity, who has the will to overcome. But Bart, he's just a sad human who just can't get over the feeling of nostalgia. And that was one of the best parts about it. Nostalgia. When he explained his rationale of what his neighborhood used to look like and how he loved that neighborhood, that was powerful. If you're a young reader and you're reading Stephen King and you end up stumbling upon this book, maybe you don't get that sense of nostalgia. But for myself, about to turn 30 years old, I've seen my neighborhood change. Heck, I've seen Canada change. And sometimes, honestly, a lot of the times, I wish I can go back in time and revisit my childhood or maintain and conserve that neighborhood feeling that I had as a kid. But that is where the positives end in Roadwork. To confuse things further, there is literally a part in the book, a moment, a lapse in time, where the main character picks up this random hitchhiking girl who's about 21 years old, and somehow, after separating with his wife, bangs this 21-year-old girl, has sex with her, and she tells him, "You really are good in bed." Dude, we're going from a man who is stuck in the past, a man who is literally becoming more insane, talking to himself, which is absolutely frustrating and absolutely confusing while you're reading this book at the beginning. And you're supposed to convince me that this guy can't do his job. This guy has a failing marriage. This guy can not even eat properly. He's drunk all the time, but manages to pick up a 21-year-old girl and have sex with her. Bruh, come on. That is the most self-indulgent part of the book I've ever read from Stephen King. It's so irrelevant. It has so little meaning at times, and it's not convincing that this were to happen. All right. Coupled with that, like I've alluded before, is the whole idea of him talking to himself. If you've read a lot of Stephen King's books, you will probably know Big Driver. Holy shit, it's the same energy where the person just talks to themselves, and I just cannot deal with it. I just cannot deal with it. It is frustrating, but it gets so much worse. The worst part of this book is the ending. All right. This ending is so polarizing in my opinion, because if you like the book, if you like the character study, you're gonna think that this ending was absolutely fantastic. If you're like the 15% of the people who enjoyed this book. And based on what I have seen, based on, the subreddit Stephen King group, it's generally considered one of the worst ones, all right? And I get it. It's the subreddit. It's a biased sample. But that's what I'm basing my knowledge on with the general public audience. When you have an ending where this man literally sets up tons of explosives in his house and then convinces the police to allow news reporters to film him blowing up his own house, bruh, the man lost his mind, blew up his house. Stephen King literally said the roof literally shot up from the house. And then in the absolute most savage Stephen King ending I have read for a fucking character, he has the gall to literally write in his book that a year and a half after the interstate highway was built, a year and a half after he blew himself up and didn't kill anyone, everyone forgot about the incident. Absolute burial of a man, of a character. This guy wanted to prove to the world, to his neighborhood, to his city, that he was fighting against bureaucracy. And you have this whole character study of this man going down into despair, delusion, craze. He blows himself up to prove a point, and it doesn't get through. And this is why I said, if you love this character, this book, the plot, chef's kiss, bro. As someone who did not like this book, absolutely horrible that I had to spend over 200 pages of reading this book to be found out that literally nobody gave a shit about it. The worst ending I've seen in a while. And I get it. You're probably wondering, Julio, Why are you reading this book if you don't like it? Because I'm on a mission to read all of Stephen King's books so I can have an informed opinion about who he is. It was a challenge. It's what got me back into reading full-time. And if that sounds interesting to you, give me a like, give me a follow, a subscribe, because I'm going to be reviewing all the books in Stephen King's catalog, and we're going to find out which ones are the best and which ones are kind of the worst. So in my opinion, this book is a 2-star book, a 4 on 10. It could be a 1.5-star book all day long as well. So with that, thank you again. What do you think about Roadwork? Have I maybe convinced you to read it, to prove me otherwise? Am I out for lunch with my opinions, or do you agree with some of the points? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, Stephen King, forever.